Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of the Unfiltered podcast. The podcast where anything and pretty much everything is on the table, and really our opinions don't matter that much. I'm your host, Matthew Francis.
And I'm your co-host, Alex Pierce. Throughout this podcast, we will cover everything from the wide world of sports, what the hell is happening with Grand Theft Auto 6, and more.
So, without further ado, let's hop right into today's episode. Now, I do want to say that we are not doing this face-to-face like we would like. We are over the internet right now, social distancing, and trying to figure out what the hell is going on in life, which seems to be the question that everyone's asking. But there are a few major things going on that aren't getting as much attention as they used to, and I think one of them that I want to cover in today's episode is the electric vehicle situation and what's going on with specifically Tesla. Now, Tesla has released a lot of cars, right? They currently have, I think, 5 or 6. They got the Model S, Model X, Model Y, Model 3. So they got 4 that are out already in production. Plus they got the Roadster that's been out and sold, and I'm pretty sure they're done with that, if I remember correctly. But they've also released like the semi-truck and the Cybertruck and stuff. So I think that these new vehicles are going to be very interesting to see how they compare to the modern day cars we see, for instance, a Chevy Silverado or a Jeep Grand Cherokee type of deal. There's a lot of Model 3s out there and Model S's out there, and I've seen them driving around where we are. And they're big, obviously, out in the California area and, where Tesla is based out of. But I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next 5, even 10 years when you start seeing more of these vehicles and seeing what's coming on. What do you think, Alex?
Definitely the electric car is going to change things. I mean, life as we know it is going to completely change. And I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast a couple days ago. And what happens when we get to the point where every car is automatic? But there's going to be this fraction of people aren't going to want an automatic car. They're going to want to drive their own car. And, when does that become the norm? Automatic cars, will it stop traffic accidents? I mean, who knows?
And that's where I think Tesla has kind of developed this whole spectrum of vehicles. Is Tesla was really the first, not necessarily the first to come out with an electric car or an electric prototype, but they were the first to really put it into action and get it out on the road and get it out to people at a decent price. I mean, yes, some of the, like the Roadster and the, semi-truck and all that are higher price. The Roadster's anywhere between $200,000 and $250,000. That's a big number for a car. But you also got to look at it, though. That's kind of more of the, Chevrolet Camaro or the Challenger or the Charger that we think of today, right? It's not a race car per se where it's
going to go 0 to 60 in 2 seconds.
Yeah, but it is, but it's not. It doesn't look like one. It doesn't drive. It certainly doesn't sound or drive like one. It just reacts in a way that looks slick, kind of like a Camaro or Challenger or whatever, where it's an everyday driver, but when you want to put your, the pedal to the metal, you can. And I think that's where Tesla got it right, is even though these vehicles are expensive, right? You know, you can buy a Challenger or even a Charger Camaro for anywhere between 25 grand and say 50 grand, depending on how you want to customize it, where you get it, and all that. But you got to look over the next, say you have that car for 10 years. How much are you spending in gas? How much are you spending in repairs? How much are you spending in all these things that could go wrong, right? An engine blows up in one of those, or a transmission goes or something, that's devastating. That could be 10 grand alone in a new engine, or it could
Mhm.
be simple as a fuel pump that goes and you're still at 3 grand because you have labor and everything. Whereas Tesla has this higher price point. Yeah, it's 200 grand for a new Roadster, but you don't have to worry about your engine blowing. You don't have to worry about all this. And with some of these newer, like newer vehicles, like the semi truck that they released back, not too long ago, with actually the newer Roadster, and even the Cybertruck, I believe, has it, where it's 4 electric motors, right? So the strain on one motor in a gas or a diesel vehicle is huge. You got all this torque coming in and going out to these these 4 corners or whatever. But the way Tesla did it was it's 4 now. So the torque going out is a lot less. It's centralized, so if something happens, it's centralized to one corner of the vehicle. And quite frankly, it's going to be a lot less to repair something like that, where instead of having to replace a whole issue, you can replace part of an issue. So instead of having to go in and say you blow a rod in an engine, now you have to redo that whole thing. Whereas you blow one of the turbines or whatever they're using, you don't have to repair that whole thing. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, the upfront cost is huge, but in the end of the day, just the repairs alone are going to save you money. And with the electric and everything, some places, depending on what type of vehicle you have and what type of plant, whatever, you do have to pay for your supercharging or just your charging in general. But at night, the new Roadster has a 600 plus mile range. That's better than any gas car already, right? Unless you have like a little V8 or V8, wow, 4-cylinder, where it's you're just putzing around town or you're on the highway. It's really not comparable range wise, and I think that alone, being able to charge it at night at your house is going to save money in itself by not having to wake up an extra 45 minutes early just to go to the gas station and fill up or whatnot. And if you find yourself on a long road trip, say I come from New York and want to go to California, there's already these superchargers spaced out all the way there, and they're popping up every day in brand new places. And I think that's what Tesla got right here was, yes, it's a big upfront cost, but the savings in the end of the day are going to be huge. And they're doing that with their whole line of vehicles. And
I mean,
you can,
when you think about it, yeah, there's a lot of things that are going to become easier with an electric vehicle. But think about long term. So how many mom and pop little repair shops are there? I mean, especially where we live in Pennsylvania and so on and so forth, there's so many of these little car shops usually run by older people, not going to be able to replace the parts on the Tesla, not going to have that sense of electric cars. There's a lot of repercussions for business. At the same time, there's the benefit for the consumer. So something that you got to watch out for, I think, and that's with anything in technology.
and I think backing on that, because you're seeing like Ford released not too long ago that they're working on a electric version of the F-150,
Crap.
and Chevy's released electric cars, and I think Volkswagen or Volvo has one out too. Currently, as it sits, yes, Tesla is the only one that will allow them to work on their vehicles, meaning they won't send parts out to a mom and pop shop or even a big Valvoline or something like that. They won't do that. And that's because they want it done right. And I think as we progress and we see Chevy come into this and Ford come into this and Volkswagen and Volvo and all of these, Mitsubishi and Mazda and all of these car companies come in
True.
and and, and start designing and building their electric vehicles, I think we're going to see Tesla transition to more of a, okay, we're going to let a certified area do it. It's going to be no different than now where a Chevy dealership has to be certified or a Ford dealership has to be certified to work on cars. I think it's going to be the same thing. Not necessarily a Tesla dealership, but someone is going to have to be Tesla certified, whether that be a mom and pop shop or whatever, just so it's getting done right. Because there are issues, like you said, where especially the autopilot comes in. Say something's up with one of the cameras and that gets replaced wrong, and now that causes an accident. Who's to blame at that? Is it because Tesla outsourced the parts to someone who didn't know what they were doing, or is it because that person didn't know what they were doing and took the job on, or is it on the consumer who took it to that place knowing that that person couldn't do the job? So there's a lot of fault there, and I think that's why Tesla is doing it all in house, is so that they know it's getting fixed right and it's getting fixed within a manner that they find acceptable. But I definitely do think, for now at least, there is a downfall to the fact that these mom and pop shops, or even the larger, commercial chains that are nationwide, it's definitely a downfall for them that they can't work on it. Now, one thing I did see though was Tesla's safety features on the semi truck that they announced a little while back, and that was, there was a couple things that I liked seeing in that. Now, the first one is, which is new for really kind of us over in the United States, not so much, in the United Kingdom and places like that, which there are certain cars, but you don't see them a lot, which is center steering, meaning the person sits in the center of the car, in this case, in the center of the semi-truck.
Yeah.
And I think that's great because I was reading an article earlier about car accidents, and especially with stopped vehicles on the side of highways, either changing a tire, texting someone, trying to be safe on the side, and someone not noticing them and hitting them. And I think there was one in there about a semi truck who had pulled off to the side for, like their duty reasons and DOT regulations and stuff. And they had just pulled off to the side and they got hit, and the actual cab of the truck, part of it got hit. Luckily, the person wasn't injured. They were on the passenger side of the truck in the back, whatever. But I think the center steering, if something like that happens, it's going to be better for them, or even if it's a rear end or a T-bone collision or whatever, it's going to be protection, right? So there's that protective shell. Whereas now, we sit on the left or the right side, you get hit on that side, that door's going to crumple. Now Tesla's kind of built in that crumple zone by sitting you in the center. Obviously now you can't really have a passenger in the front seat with you, and that's going to raise issues for these companies that have situations where they run two drivers, right? So one might drive for 10 hours, the other one will drive for 10 hours or whatnot. And there might run an issue with that, but they did show what looked to be, they didn't go into a lot of detail of it, but there looked to be a sleeper cab on the back, like most trucks have now, or at least the majority of them that are long haul trucks. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if there's ability to put an extra seat in the back or whatnot for these companies that run two, sometimes even three drivers, depending on how far they're going. And another thing is the autopilot. A lot of times, especially going down highways, we have the thruway here in New York, where trucks swerve a little because of wind or whatnot, or they have to avoid something or whatnot. These autopilot things, and these autopilot controls, I think, are going to be good, especially when a large wind gust comes up and that vehicle senses that, okay, I'm drifting to the left side. I need to pull back. And it's going to have a faster reaction time than an average human would. I mean, sure, it's going to have a faster reaction time than I would, um, if wind takes it or whatnot. And I think that's going to be another great addition. And then one final thing I like, not necessarily a safety feature, but the cost of this, right? I mean, a Peterbilt truck or any diesel truck brand out there now is expensive. It's really expensive. The semi truck is got a starting price of, depending on which model you get, between $150,000 and $200,000. But think of it this way: it's got a range of, again, depending on which model, 300 to 500 miles. Um, but if you think about that, it's not a lot, and I think they're going to have to adjust that to make it effective for companies to use. Because I mean, there's trucks now that can go 1,000 miles without even blinking. So I think that battery range is going to be needed to be adjusted, but the fuel savings, you're the Tesla, when Elon Musk introduced this at his unveiling, they had a number of $200,000, and that's in fuel savings a year. Now I know truckers that go from Maine all the way to California and back in a month, 2 or 3 times if they need to, or wherever. That's a lot of money in gas. Diesel's not cheap, and certainly we're running. At some point the world's going to run out of natural resources, and we're going to have to go to electric. And there's definitely not only savings, but with any Tesla vehicle, there's federal and even state rebates. I know California's got a state rebate just because they have their strict standards, EPA rebates. There's all kinds of rebates out there just for buying a electric vehicle, and I think certainly that is going to be where we move to, and where the future is.
Yeah, most definitely. There's so many variables. It's amazing when you think about it. It was, what, 100 years ago that the average person started getting cars? It was a little over 115 years ago that cars came out, period.
Yeah, roughly.
Think at how far that we've come in the span of human time.
I mean, just look at the pickup truck. We
Yeah,
started with the Model T was really, I guess, the first pickup truck that had a large storage area. Yes, it was covered in. It was more of a van back then, but you had that large storage area, and now look where we are with these giant F-350 dualies or 550 dualies that can pull anything under the sun, or even a semi truck.
yeah. Even like as one that we had, um Ford Edge was an SUV, basic SUV, but it could pull a pop-up camper. The fact that an SUV had that much torque and that much power is truly amazing.
Yeah, and this is where I think the Cybertruck, when it came out, it had a lot of beef of saying, oh, that looks ugly, or that looks this and that. But I was running some specs, and I pulled some specs on it, as well as pulled some specs on a 2020 Chevy Silverado, one of the leaders in pickup trucks currently. So I pulled the specs, and I kind of ran through them. So the Cybertruck has a 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, which is decent for a pickup truck. The Chevy Silverado is pulling a 7.1 seconds on a 0 to 60. But here's where I think that we're good. So the Cybertruck currently sits at 250 miles range, which is a little low for an average, gas pickup truck. They're more, I would say, 280s to 300s, depending on what year and what type of gas, etc., and what you're towing. Obviously, that all changes. But I definitely think that if that range can get, a little bit bigger to meet those, that Cybertruck's going to kick off. And looking at the towing capacity, the Cybertruck's rated right now at 7,500 pounds of towing capacity. That'll pull a lot. A standard Chevy Silverado's between 6,600 and 9,800 pounds of towing capacity. So that Cybertruck's dead center of a Chevy Silverado, and even a Ford F-150 is in that range as well. But here's one thing I saw with a normal cab. The Cybertruck can hold 4 people. Chevy Silverado, the crew cab can hold 4 people. Actually, 5 if you consider the seat in the middle. But there's only 72 cubic feet of storage in a Chevy Silverado truck bed, right? And that's limited when you put caps on it and tonneau covers and all this. But the Cybertruck's got 100 cubic feet of storage. That's a significant amount more for a truck person who's only ever driven trucks, who's only ever going to drive a truck and only ever going to buy a certain truck. That's huge, because that means you can now add, you're going camping, now you can add a four-wheeler, or you can add, extra supplies or whatever, because you have that extra space. And that's when they release the Cybertruck, they release that ATV too, that is electric, and they drove it right up in the back because that Cybertruck has a low clearance. Now, obviously, the Cybertruck, with being a low clearance car, I think it was like 15 or 16 inches of clearance. I don't have it right in front of me, but somewhere in that range, it's not going to be an off-road vehicle. It's not going to be meant to go climbing and stuff like that. It's not going to be the Jeeps and stuff like that of what we have now, or even the new Ford Bronco, but it's going to be something that you can drive an ATV in the back without needing ramps or anything. With the tailgate coming down and all that, you can drive right up in the back. And another thing, when you're not using that bed or whatever, even if you are, you have a panel that goes on top that's got solar panels on it. Or at least the model that they were showing had them. Whether that will be stock or not is a different story. I do not know. But that's going to be huge to increase that 250-mile range, where during the day you're charging all day as you're driving. So that 250-mile range could be unlimited for 12 or 14 hours of sunlight if you have it, or even more. So that's going to be interesting to see in comparison to a Silverado or an F-150 or even a Toyota Tacoma or whatnot. So that's going to be interesting to see, and I think we're definitely moving in a direction where electric cars are going to be more prominent on the roads, more safer, and in the end of the day, more cost effective to spend that upfront cost and basically reimburse yourself without having to pay for gas or for this or for that over the next 5-10 years to make that cost back. Yes, you're still going to have to pay for electric to charge at your house, whatnot, but in the end of the day, it's going to be 100 times less than having to, park at a pump once a week or twice a week, depending on how much you travel.
Yeah. I mean, when you were talking about the price, what you said, 200, 250, like thousand for it?
For
The Tesla and stuff like that.
yeah, I mean,
Well,
depending on
so,
where you start, yeah.
well, think about it this way. I know a lot of the people that I've talked to, a lot of my friends that I've talked to, they kind of put Tesla up there with cars like Rolls Royce and Ferrari. Average cost of a Rolls Royce. I'm not talking a brand new one. I'm talking one that's about 5 years old. Average lifespan for them. Still about 300,000 plus. When you think about that for a second, kind of puts it in more of a obtainable goal. Is Ferraris 400,000, Lambos 600,000, you name it, they keep going up and up and up. Tesla's not completely unaffordable. I mean, yes, there's a lot of people who are not going to be able to buy them, at least for a little while. Then the people that can, how much money will they save? Like there's a lot of cool variables that end up becoming norm.
Yeah, and I think, looking at it, yes, there's a major upfront cost, but Teslas could go for 400,000 miles. We haven't seen the end of a new Tesla. We haven't seen how far they can push it. Obviously, some have gotten in accidents or whatnot from someone ramming into them and have been, quote unquote, decommissioned. But electric, you don't have to worry about grease. You don't have to worry about oils. You don't have to worry about all of these fluids, antifreeze, and this and that we put in our cars daily to keep them running smooth. That, yes, they make them run smooth, but they break down, parts. They break down seals. They break down rubber gaskets. They break down all this stuff inside of our motors alone and cause issues as well, just to keep them running smooth. We don't have to worry about that in electric. It's all mechanical, right? So I think that alone is going to allow the life expectancy of a Tesla to increase extraordinarily compared to, any other current car that's on the road. And I think that that's going to factor in ultimately to the lines of who's going to buy a Tesla and who's not. Personally, I would buy a Tesla. Not necessarily right now with the line that they have out currently, but I definitely think that with some advancements, especially in battery life and such, I would be 100% sold on a Tesla in the future of electric cars, just because that's where the world's going. And I think that if they can make a couple advancements, and the technology is there to do it, they just have to. And I think we're getting to that point.
You know what I wonder about when it comes to electric cars?
What?
You're with me, because you know where I'm going with this. Talked about this. What the horn's gonna sound like? Is it gonna be like a Roadrunner, like beep beep, and then off to the races? If it is, I'm gonna be freaking honking the horn every time I'm at a stop sign. Are you kidding me? That's gonna be freaking crazy. I'm gonna feel like Roadrunner.
And
Coyote.
I've never heard a Tesla horn, but I think that's definitely a good way to leave off, and we'll come back next week with an answer on what an actual Tesla horn sounds like, because I have no clue. And I'm going to have to Google that one when we get done recording here. So, moving on from our kind of a car segment, I want to get into something that both me and you like, Alex, and I know a lot of people do as well, and that's...
Millions of people!
Oh, God. And that's the video game side of things. Now...
I'm a nerd, what can I say?
For years, we've been in these first-person shooters, or these realistic games, as they're called, or there's... whatever. But Grand Theft Auto has been one from really the beginning to captivate hundreds of thousands of people worldwide into this, I'm going to go do things that I can't normally do without getting in trouble type of deal. And
lots of freaking trouble,
and Grand Theft Auto 5, since its release way back, I feel old thinking about 2013 when they released it.
We were 12.
Yeah.
Listeners, think about this for a second.
Yeah.
19, right? We're 19 now. Well, Matthew will be soon.
Getting there.
19. Yeah. When GTA 5 came out, we were 12 years old. We were in middle school.
So I remember my first Grand Theft Auto game that I ever played was Grand Theft Auto 4. And that was based in New York City, Liberty City. And I remember playing on an Xbox 360. Really one of the first, besides the Wii, first gaming consoles I had. And getting captivated in the fact that I can go and do things that I normally wouldn't be able to. Shoot people and steal cars and all of this stuff. And I think that it's a good... It's kind of a catch-22 in today's society. A lot of people say we shouldn't have these first-person shooter games or these unrealistic games because they're feeding bad, whatever into our children and the society and whatnot. But I think
I
it's also
say
a
my
good
argument
way.
on that.
I think it's also a good way though for people to get their emotions out and express a creative side, because not everyone, yes, me and you, Alex, go into Grand Theft Auto Online and shoot at other people in there, but it's not always just about that. There's a whole world out there of realistic role play, and GTA 5 servers that are strictly role play, whether it be Xbox One or PS4 or PC. I mean, we certainly see places like my community, San Andreas First Responders, or Department of Justice roleplay, or Orange County roleplay OCRP, where they've built names for themselves and they're working on realistic but fun roleplay for everyone. And
And
I think that that is an expression, not necessarily what Rockstar Games and GTA, the franchise, is expected to come out of it, but I definitely think it's something that is good for emotional expression and people getting their kind of thoughts out of their head.
I think that, having been a part of a role play community with Matthew, um, the cool thing about that is a lot of the normal things that you can do in GTA, just randomly on a whim, say, this person's kicking me off, stoplight, I'm just gonna shoot out their tires or shoot them. Disclaimer: neither one of us are that crazy. A little bit crazy, but neither one of us are to the point where he should be locked up in the loony bin. Sometimes I wonder about him. It's just me. Um, all kidding aside, it's a very fun thing to do. The role play. It's there's a lot of realism you wouldn't think about in a video game. There's you don't stop at the stoplight. There's a cop there. You're gonna get pulled over. People don't think about that in these video games. When I first brought it up to my father, he was like, "What is role playing?" So there's so many different avenues. GTA 5 is gone. It has absolutely been amazing. I know when I first started playing, I was 14. 14. I remember it took a crap ton of convincing for my mom for her to let me get it. Once the one thing I could not do, right? This is the funny part about this. There was one thing she told me I could not do. You want to guess what it is?
Probably rob something is my guess,
Oh, she said I couldn't go to the strip club.
which is
She,
fair.
she heard about the topless women, and she's like, "No, going to the strip club." Fortunately, she didn't know about the hookers. Just kidding. Uh, she didn't know about the hookers. I didn't either until a year later. Um, I remember being into it, just so into the story, into the customization, the stupid mundane things that most game developers overlook. Going into your house, being blackout drunk off of whiskey, or watching TV in a video game.
And that's kind of transitions into what I want to see. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk over, especially the last year and even the last month, over GTA 6. When is it going to be released? What is it? And, there was a former Rockstar employee who has been accurate with predictions of GTA 5 and some of the online updates and even the updates for the game itself. And he said it would be in Vice City. Now, we go back a little while to the former Vice City. I'm going to call it former Vice City. Obviously, it's based off Miami, and I think there was a lot of things between Vice City and San Andreas, where we got Los Santos and Blaine County, that were updated. Like you said, the interiors and the ability to sit down and watch TV in your house or change your clothes, and I think that's great for people to express themselves in they can dress how they are or how they want to be, and they can do all these things, and I think that's what I want to see in Grand Theft Auto 6 too. And I think that there's going to be some of the same factors, right? We're still going to have the basic storyline that we've kind of seen in all of the Grand Theft Auto games, where you start small and you get in with these mobsters or these, you know, crime bosses or whatever, and start working your way up. But I also want to see some of these variations where we get more animals, for instance, or we get more interiors, or we get, you know, bigger clothing selections, newer cars. Obviously, GTA and Rockstar can't, you know, put in all of these vehicles that are real life. Copyright issues and such and patents don't allow that. But I
They have
definitely
fun with it, naming it their own things, and that's the
exactly.
cool part.
And I think that they have expressed themselves in a way by doing that. But I think that there needs, you know, for instance, more animals. The you know since Red Dead Redemption 2 came out,
Oh my god, do I love that
and
game?
the online version of that, I think that we need to add horses and cows and farm animals and even more wildlife, bears and stuff. You know, obviously they have the technology, but you've kind of stuck with the basic ones over the past 3 or 4 Rockstar games of, okay, you have a dog, or you have two versions of cats, or you have, you know, one mountain lion that's always chasing you even in the middle of the city. You know, I think that we need some more realistic animals and some more realistic um, interiors and stuff like that, or even some vehicles. And I think that by doing that, they're going to get a lot more people interested in the role play side of things, or the uh, you know, where they're joining communities, whether it be on a 5M server, or, you know, Xbox or PlayStation, or they're using these things like 5PD that's come out, or LSPDFR, where they can play in these types of deals, get these first person, you know, role play themes out of the way, and be submersed in the game, and be able to kind of exclude themselves from the world and run the life of their character in the game the way they could never, or, you know, don't have the ability to in real life.
And I mean, if you look at Red Dead Redemption 2, example, I grew up a Western guy. I grew up, with my grandparents, my parents watching the Westerns. When I was younger, I'd try and interact them with, my imagination. Um, and then Red Dead Redemption 2 comes out. I get to, granted, I was, I think, 17 at the time it came out. Um, and got me away from what was going on in my life at that point. It allowed me to go back into my childhood and reenact, things that I'd had in my head. You know, such realistic gunfights, shootouts, the the environments. And I think if you look at how far they came with Red Dead Redemption 2, Red Dead Redemption, imagine how far they're going to go with GTA 6. And one thing I want to see personally is, yes, Los Santos is cool. Yes, Blaine County is cool. There's still a lot of places I have yet to go. Why don't they open it up? Liberty City, Vice City, and Los Santos. We know they can do this.
And
We
that's an
know.
interesting fact too, because there's developers out there that have developed Vice City and Liberty City that you can put on the GTA 5 map and fly to them, drive around all this. It's, you know, go about the city as normal. Obviously, there's some issues with the water and stuff because they're over the ocean, but I think that's, and I've said this for a little while, I think that's a good idea to have that so that you can pick, you know, where you want to, you know, rob a car from, or, you know, it makes it more realistic too, where you rob a bank in San Andreas, you're going to flee the state, right?
And if you get, like in Red Dead Redemption 2, wanted levels. Okay, you're wanted here. Well, you know, if you're wanted, say San Andreas, oh, I'm gonna go to Vice City.
Yeah.
And then, if I decide to, you can come back to San Andreas, maybe like have a politician, do something. I think that would be a cool thing to do, and include like a political thing. I mean, granted, our current political system is pretty screwy anyway, and it's enough comedy for 1,000 comedians.
I just say that's its own episode right there alone.
If you take both sides and you make them so far to the extremes, You just go nuts with that. Imagine that. Like,
and,
they have
and
mentioned. It's
and
just there's so many things that you can go and do with this. Like fly from like you were saying from San Andreas to Vice City. Maybe there's like a this county between Vice City and Liberty City. Wildlife there. Granted, that would be a massive map to put in a game.
but if
Be a
you look at
big
the map sizes over the past 10 years, they've only gotten bigger compared to the
starting
previous, even Vice
bigger.
City. You know, Del Perro in San Andreas is bigger than Vice City was, and that was only two GTA games ago, right? Granted, it's been a while, but if you think 2013 when GTA 5 came out,
It's the biggest map
it was the
ever.
biggest map in its time. And like I said, Vice City, who was, not too long before that, was the size of a third of Los Santos. So it can definitely be done. And I think doing that, like you said, it's going to increase, wanted levels. You're not going to be wanted in every city in the world unless you're, this huge criminal. But it's going to open up these ideas with, again, new interiors, revisiting places that you have played before in other games. And for the RP side of things, with the role players, it's going to open up all of these areas, where you can patrol in three different states, completely different states, and go from there and enjoy three games really in one, but have the story mode of one game that's spread out between all three. And I think that's really what's gonna um, kind of expand on the Grand Theft Auto and the Rockstar enterprises. Now, when GTA 6 first started kind of getting um, hinted around that it was going to start getting worked on or whatever, and there were some concepts out there, I thought about it. What city would I want Grand Theft Auto 6 to be based in? And I went back and I picked two, Las Vegas and Chicago. Now, Las Vegas itself is not big enough, I don't think. That's kind of going back to the Vice City type size where it's
That
smaller.
that would be that would be very beneficial thing to the game because if each city is the size of Los Santos, that's there's going to be some problems. If you have like Liberty City and Los Santos, big freaking cities, you have Vice City, this smaller city, but there's more to do.
Yeah.
Can you know
And,
what I'm saying?
and I think and that's kind of why I picked Vegas. There's obviously smaller towns a long ways from Vegas, right? Vegas is kind of in the middle of nowhere. But I think the same way they did the Los Santos Blaine County transition in GTA 5, they could do that too, where you have this small kind of city that's Vice City size, but you have six casinos that you can go into, or you got this, or you got that, or you got all these interiors that you can go in. That's
All
going to
these
be,
apartments,
yeah, that's going to be so interactive for everyone that, like, even like you said earlier, there's still places in Grand Theft Auto 5 I haven't been. And I think if you do that with Grand Theft Auto 6, it's going to be years before people find all the places and figure out, what is what. And doing that, you can expand to these little towns outside. And I think another good factor would be you not necessarily do just one state. Vegas is it's close to state borders. I mean, it's not really close, but it's close enough where you could stretch over into part of California, or you could stretch over into, any of these, Colorado, wherever. You could stretch out into that and say, pick a small town on the border of California and say, hey, you know, state lines, right? So there's this
like they do in
kind
Red
of,
Dead Redemption
yeah,
2.
there's kind of this contradiction of what's happening here versus I go on a desert road for 5 miles and what's going on here type of deal. And I think that's going to be interesting. And I also picked Chicago because of that big city, but yet you have the ability to use the outer skirts. Chicago's a big city, but there's many places around Chicago, little suburbs and urban areas that are on the outskirts of it that you make all these houses, open interior houses. It's gonna blow people's minds, and it's gonna be interesting to see how people use them. And like I said earlier, it's going to be years before people find all the interiors in Chicago, and I think it's going to be a good basis. Everyone knows Chicago, especially on the law enforcement and fire side. They have very distinctive vehicles. So when you get into, I'm going to rob a bank or I'm going to do that, okay, this car's after me. That's a cop. I know. Or I just burnt a car. This fire truck's coming. And it's going to be very almost historic for people in seeing, kind of like Liberty City was with NYPD and the FDNY vehicles that they used to represent that. And with graphics nowadays, they're going to blow them out of the park. They have to. And if they don't, it's going to be bad for them.
It'll be a colossal failure. But I have the utmost of doubt that Rockstar would botch that up. They are, from everything I've read and everything I've heard, some of the most incredible developers. I mean, they've pushed the envelope every game. Every game is.
Look at the difference between Grand Theft Auto 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2.
That's only 5 years.
It's not that far in between, and look at the huge, and I mean huge improvements in that, and you can see it in the online versions of both too. Major improvements.
On top of the fact that as time goes on in Red Dead Redemption 2, one of my favorite things is make a decision, right? That decision is going to impact however way you went about that decision is going to impact the rest of the game. That in itself, if you do some of the stories as Arthur in the beginning, I'm betting a lot of people have already played Red Dead Redemption 2. So I'm gonna throw a little spoiler, but not that much. If you go and you do some missions as Arthur, well, later on at the end of the game when you're playing as John, you can interact with those people and they're older. They're, everything is so different from the beginning of the game with Arthur than it is at the end with John that it's an incredible, that is absolutely amazing.
Yeah. And I think one thing that they should look into doing with the Grand Theft Auto enterprises is bringing back some of those old characters from Liberty City and Vice City. A lot of them didn't die off, and a lot of them are still, I guess, existent. We see them all in GTA Online, etc. But I think bringing back some of those, maybe having this big mobster reunion type deal with these three cities. If we get San Andreas and Vice City and Liberty City all in the same map, that's going to be huge to have, Lester meet up with all the guys from Liberty City and all the mobsters from, Vice City and everything. That's going to be huge. And there's got to be something big planned. Obviously GTA 5 blew us away with the heist missions and stuff and all that. And they're still doing it. They just released an update today itself allowing 6 heist missions out of the yacht. But you get all those guys together, there's no doubt that they don't have something planned that is huge and major that is coming.
If you look at, you go to downtown LS, and in the projects area, you've got the clan wars.
Oh yeah.
Imagine this. You've got Vice City, Liberty City, Los Santos, and that's what I'd like to see. Include something like, have a Vegas and name it something like Sin City. Bingo. Just for the hell of it. Something out there. Have a Sin City that's basically Vegas. You have these four, but then you have certain mafia in Liberty City, you have the gangs in Vice City, then in LS you have whatever. And what if there's this clan, not clan, but this faction war? They're trying to rob this. Well, there's other people trying to rob it. You just have this all out just insanity going on.
And that was something we kind of saw in GTA 5 a little, was you have the the two gangs in the city. You have the Ballers mainly, and then you also got I can't think of them off the top of my head. But you got the two gangs in the city, the Purples and the Greens. But if you look in the county, you got the Lost MC. And those, a gang member in the city and a motorcycle gang in the county, those are two completely different ends of a spectrum when it comes to gangs. And I think having the Lost come down like they did by the Diamond Casino there with that little fortress, that brought some tension. Not necessarily if they didn't really interact, and they did at times interact, where there was these massive shootouts, and if you get them mad at each other, it just goes crazy. But just having them there for the player, that brought tension to them. And now you're kind of putting yourself into, okay, if something goes down, which side am I on here? And you're not even making a decision because in the end of the day, they're both shooting at you anyways. But it's like, what do I do in this situation? Whose side am I on? And I think that's going to be interesting if you get those three cities together and you get the the gangs from this Liberty City coming over to San Andreas to make their way to Vice City, or opposite Vice City to Liberty City, or or San Andreas to Liberty City or Vice City. It's going to be interesting to see, and I definitely think that if they do that, they have a long list of things to choose from, huge huge accountability things that are going to bring so much to the realisticness of what goes on, and it's going to be eye-opening to a lot of people. And I think the technology's there, and it's definitely, I think, worth them. A lot of people have asked for it, and I think it's definitely worth giving it a shot. Maybe we won't get it in GTA 6, but we might get it in like GTA 7, where they might call it Grand Theft Auto Reborn or whatever. And I think that's going to be interesting to see. And I guess only time will tell at this point. And we'll have to wait for hopefully some more updates to come and see what's going on.
One last thought on that before we move to my section of the podcast. I have faith in Rockstar Games. They've blown me away everything, including games that, graphics wise are outdated, like the earlier Grand Theft Autos. Stories, the voice acting, it's incredible. And you look at the list, the people who have voice acted in this, and it's amazing. It really is. So Rockstar, if they ever listen to this, I don't know if they will or not, but got my faith.
And they definitely got mine.
Right, my turn.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know you got some stuff that you've been itching to talk about over there.
Well, so listeners, I'm the nerd, right? And yet I'm the baseball player, so I got some sports and some politics. So here we go. Well, today, Joe Biden, the presumptive Democratic nominee, we're gonna talk about a little bit of politics. Finally made his decision on his VP. And that's Kamala Harris. Now, funny part is about that, as my brother-in-law and I were discussing earlier, during the debates, Kamala Harris openly called him racist. So, it's an interesting ticket. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
And I was definitely, I hadn't thought about that. I've definitely heard, previously about it and stuff. But I definitely, I think it's going to be interesting to see. There's a lot, it's, obviously Trump's had Mike Pence, and a lot of political candidates pick their vice president long before, we get, we're only, what, 2.5, 3 months away from, an election, and he's now just picking. I think it would have benefited him a little bit more if he would have picked picked sooner. And with her coming out face to face and calling him a racist and kind of smack talking him on social media and interviews and stuff, I think there's going to be some tension here in the next couple of weeks, where even the next month, where they don't meet eye to eye on things, and we might see some interesting things go on.
I mean, it's not unheard of for a presidential candidate to pick a VP who they have issues with. I mean, Matthew can attest to this. My hero is John F. Kennedy. Well, Lyndon Johnson, because it was a Kennedy Johnson ticket, when he picked Lyndon Johnson, he didn't pick Lyndon Johnson because he liked him. Oh, the two of them actually despised each other. Or so JFK's brother, Bobby, they despised each other. The only reason Johnson was picked because Kennedy needed the South to win. The election came down, it was very close. It was one of the closest in history. I think Joe Biden's decision to Kamala Harris is it's a big thing. The first African American woman on a presidential ticket. And he's also, this is something I thought of recently. Now that he's picked her, he's going to link that with him being VP to Obama. You get the tie there? You get you get what I mean by tie-in?
Yeah, and I think something that's going to hurt that campaign in general, just the fact that Joe Biden's obviously had a lot of experience in government, right? He was the vice president for Obama under, both his terms.
And senator
Yeah,
for I think 40 years before that.
Something like that, yeah. He's been in Washington. And a lot of people are calling out the fact that, he's making these promises and he's saying he can fix these things. But, 2008 came around and we had some of the similar issues. And I think him not really being he was present, but I don't think he was prominent. And what I mean by that is he was there, he was alongside Obama, but I don't think he was standing up, saying anything. I think he was kind of just sitting along for the ride type of deal. And a lot of people are calling him out saying, well, we had some of these similar issues back in 2008 that were occurring in 2020, and you didn't say anything. You didn't offer your opinions. You didn't, quote unquote, fix an idea, or, fix a problem. And a lot of people are calling him out on that. And I think that along with the tension on the Democratic side, is going to cause issues. Now, don't get me wrong. I do think there are some issues for Trump and Pence, when it comes to how people think they handled certain things over the past 4 years or whatnot.
Among other things.
But I definitely think that they have their cool kind of together, and Trump didn't come in the first 4 years as a politician, right? He hasn't been a senator, he hasn't been a House of Representative member, he hasn't been a vice president, he hasn't been any of that. So he came in, I think, under the curveball a little where it comes to that. But I think that there have been a lot of learning curves and such, and I think that they have a little bit of a head start on what's going on in current times. The way we stand right now, I think some of these issues that we're experiencing in 2020 are going to move to 2021, and when January comes around, whoever it is, I don't think the new people coming in, if there are new people coming in, are going to be able to kind of handle it and look back at what's happened kind of under the curtains that everyday public doesn't see, and handle it. I don't know if that's going to be something that's going to happen, and that's going to be interesting to see when November and even January comes around, if there is a new president that is elected.
And see, here's the thing about that is, when you look at outrage of Donald Trump, I mean, he has what hasn't he done at this point, to be completely honest? There is this level of ineptitude, basically, not qualified for it, that both Trump and Biden are showing. Both very old. They're both past, in what my opinion should be running age for president, because you need someone who has youth and who has all of their mental sense. On no occasion has Biden or Trump separated themselves in the fact that I'm concerned about their mental health. I'm not talking of depression or anxiety or anything. I'm talking about dementia, maybe Alzheimer's. both have shown me that something is up. Really, they're not going to say anything. They want to win. Everyone wants to be, well, all of them want to be president. There's something there that both of them have. Neither one of them is going to separate from each other in that aspect. And look at downside, Trump not being a politician. The US has lost so much respect in the world community on top of the fact that, he's alienated friends like Germany and the EU and NATO and so on and so forth. Biden, on the other hand, is a big supporter of those. I think that's a big one. That's a big issue that not a lot of people are talking about yet. Come election time, the question is who would you rather have going up against Putin, Kim Jong-un, or standing with, France or England? So that's a big issue that I think is not getting enough attention.
And here's my opinion on that, and I think I do agree with points in there where there are certain issues that I would agree with and stuff, but I think that with him coming in, he has not necessarily done everything that the Republican Party wants him to do, and he certainly hasn't done anything that the Democratic Party wants him to do. But he's not necessarily picking one side, and he's staying kind of neutral in facts, and I think that's good, especially when it comes to overseas operations and Middle East operations. But I definitely think that there are issues where there have been some downfalls, and when it comes to Germany or Japan or even Mexico, those major countries that we've had conflict with and kind of talked with over the past hundreds of years, there's definitely been some issues with communication in the past 4 years. But I also think there's definitely been some upsides to those communication errors where we have gotten major manufacturing groups to stay in the United States and invest in American production, which I think that's something that we haven't really looked at the past, I'm going to say 20 years, where a lot of our stuff have come from, there's a big production area just south of El Paso in Mexico. It's called Juarez, Mexico. And Johnson & Johnson, all these other major companies have plants there because they can produce stuff for $1 an hour plus their materials, and then just ship it across the border and sell it for $100. So they're making a bunch of money, and I think that's something that he has pushed himself for is, made in America, and that transitions too with his support of law enforcement and the way that we love our country. A lot of people, you pretty much ask anyone in America and they'll say they love their country. They might not say I love the politicians, they might not say I love this, but they're going to say that they love America. And that's something that he is kind of backed on and gotten behind with, bringing manufacturing in and supporting law enforcement and supporting these American things that they've got their name in America and then almost kind of lost their roots in America and went other places because it was cheaper and stuff. And I mean, we've seen quality decline in vehicles, especially where we are, where after a year you got a hole in the side of your car because of the rust. Vehicles aren't made the same way. And I think part of that is because of the outsourcing that is being done to other countries. Yes, there's been communication errors, but I definitely think that some of those errors have led to good things.
Now, when the Democratic primaries were going about and were going through, I saw who I wanted president. He was presidential. He what he was talking about. He had something that not a lot of people that has good experience, and that's military experience. He was the perfect candidate. That was Pete Buttigieg. I was 100% behind him. I dislike Trump. I dislike Biden. I feel Biden's time is past. He needs to just go write his memoirs now. So I dislike for Trump versus my past like Biden is to the point where it's very similar to 16. I have two people that no one really likes. Who's the lesser of two evils? I think this is where both parties are losing people. Now, me myself as a registered Democrat, um, my party is increasingly going to the left, where Kennedy was. I fall in line with Kennedy with the JFK's beliefs 100%. So they're moving so far past that I'm not recognizing it. I can't even look at the Republicans and say, okay, I'm aligning more with them because they're moving so far to the right. Problem is no one wants to accept the fact that people are sick and tired of left and right. Myself, I'm sick of it. Right people for the job or the people that don't care about party. Say screw party unity, what's best for the country. Neither ticket, neither option in November is going to say screw it to the party. Oh, that's pretty much where I'm going to leave off on that. It's going to be an interesting couple of months.
And
I don't know.
I definitely think you're right with come November, there's going to be a lot of decisions that have to be made, especially with younger people coming up to vote. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how decisions are swayed and how really people look at what's happened the past 4 years as Donald Trump and Mike Pence. And over the past 8 years prior to that with Biden and Obama, I think that's going to all come into question in November and even leading up to that with the conventions and that. And it's gonna be interesting to see what happens and how people react to what they've done in their time in some sort of presidential office, and then obviously with Biden being a senator previously, it's gonna be interesting, and Harris being a attorney general and all that. There's gonna be and a senator, yeah. There's gonna be some competition between the two sides, and I definitely think it's gonna be an interesting way to go, and all that.
Well, since that topic is now done, do we have enough time for one last thing?
Yeah, I think we got enough time.
All right. Well, we all know who the greatest quarterback of all time is. Now, Matthew's going to differ on this because he's a Bills fan, unfortunately for him.
Well,
we all know who the GOAT is, and that's Tom Brady. 6 rings, 20 years. I mean, he's slowing a little bit, but he's still... there's no doubt in my mind whatsoever anymore that he's not the GOAT. Well, we all know, or we should, unless you've been living under a rock, in which case, might want to move it. Tom Brady is no longer with the Patriots. Shocking, considering he was with the Patriots. They won their first Super Bowl before I was born, before either one of us was born. Yeah. It's incredible. It's an incredible thought to think about. He's not there. Now, he's in Tampa Bay. Nice warm weather. I don't blame him. I would have done it years ago.
I think pretty much all of us would have years ago.
Yeah. So here's the funny thing. Bills are on the rise. They've got a young, good head coach. They've got a very young and very good quarterback. Also added Stephon Diggs, one of the fastest, most game-breaking and ankle-breaking receivers in the game at the moment. He's still underrated. They got him in the offseason. Already load an already stacked roster. Here's the question. Bills, Patriots. Now, the Patriots had a hole at quarterback. They were going to go with a guy named Jared Stidham, who didn't really play last year. He's going in the year 2, so there's some growing that he has to do. And they had another capable guy named Brian Hoyer. The Patriots and Bill Belichick made it interesting. He went out and signed former MVP Cam Newton. Cam Newton, though he slowed down due to injury the last 2 years, his first 4 or 5 years, he was amazing. He's big, he's tall, he's tough, he's fast, he's got an arm like a cannon, outspoken, and he's a little extra in his off the field and stuff like that.
Definitely agree with that.
He is undoubtedly physical talent. I mean, he is a little bit of Lamar Jackson with a little bit of Patrick Mahomes. Just not as composed as Jackson and Mahomes. So I'm going to throw this out to Matthew first, and then I'll give you my take. Bills are the Patriots. Will the Bills finally win the AFC East for the first time in, I think, multiple years? Definitely over a decade, I believe. What do you think?
So I think it's always an interesting topic with the East and there's always been that rivalry between the Bills and the Patriots and their fans in general. And I think this year, with everything going on with COVID-19 and the way things are, and the Patriots, having 8 of their frontline members opting out, I definitely think it's going to be interesting to see how everything goes off. I know they play each other twice, and I think a lot of predictions have the Bills beating them both times. Do I know if that's true or not? I don't know. The Bills have added a lot of defensive players, really building up that defensive line. And I think, like you said, we got Sean McDermott, who's a really motivated coach. And I think with him being really motivated, with the leadership of Josh Allen and some of the other players and all that, I think it's gonna be a toss-up. But I think the Bills might pull it off this year, if depending on if anyone else decides to opt out or whatnot. I've seen some predictions where the Bills are up there, upwards of 11 wins, beating the Patriots, twice. Both times they play, both home and away. And I think it's going to be interesting. And I think the only way to really find out what's going to happen is to tune in and see. Obviously we don't have a major preseason here, and
season at all.
Yeah, so we really can't get what the second and third string people are going to be and your backups. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. And, if one person gets hurt, how are these new people that were just signed this year, maybe into a second string backup position, say someone gets hurt, how are they going to react? It's going to be interesting. We don't have a preseason. We don't have a lot of details. How training camps really only started a couple weeks ago, officially in person. So it's going to be interesting to see. And I definitely think it's going to be a good toss-up. But I think Bills are going to pull it off this year, and maybe I think it's going to be close. But I think we might get it.
And do believe football's a lot more than X's and O's, and there's a lot of terminology and stuff that Cam Newton has to learn. I think if he can adapt to the Josh McDaniels system, Patriots offensive coordinator, I think it's going to definitely be an incredible season. Bill Belichick has proven he kicks the Bills' butt pretty good, and we'll see what happens. But I still think Bill Belichick pulls that out at the end and takes the crown one last year.
It's definitely going to be interesting. All right, guys, I think this concludes the first episode of the Unfiltered podcast. We had a lot of great conversation in there, and over the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a lot more building on to some of the stuff we said today, and waiting for some more details to come out. And make sure to tune in every Wednesday for a brand new episode that comes out, and with brand new content. So I've been your host, executive producer, and writer, Matthew Francis.
I'm your co-host, writer, and executive producer, Alex Pierce. Make sure to follow the podcast and leave a review on Apple Music, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Need the help? And it'll be much appreciated. So that's all, folks, for me.
You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at Matthew Francis Media, and that's at MattF_media14, or you can email us at MatthewFrancisMedia@gmail.com. That's MatthewFrancisMedia@gmail.com. The Unfiltered Podcast is a production of Matthew Francis Media, and we thank you for tuning in to today's episode.